Hi, everybody. Welcome to Game of the Day from round 9 of the Dortmund chess tournament. Just concluded, Super Grandmaster chess tournament that was won in dramatic fashion by Fabiano Caruana of Italy on tiebreak over Sergey Karjakin. Both finished in the winner's circle by winning important games in the last round to finish ahead of rivals Peter Leko, Vladimir Kramnik, and Arkady Nadic all tied at +2, and Mr. Ponomaryov also at +2. My pick for game of the day was the fine victory by former world champion Vladimir Kramnik in his round 9 bout against German Grandmaster Georg Meier. Not not quite perfect chess, but a very finely prosecuted attack, and definitely a fitting game of the day from round 9 of this great tournament. Okay, we start out with an English opening that now becomes a semi-terrish variation of the Queen's Gambit declined. And here Meyer could have opted for e takes d5, but it went instead for knight takes d5. E takes d5 is, I think, considered a little more unpleasant from White's point of view. It liberates the bishop. It does at the risk of a isolated d-pawn. But White's bishop on c1 will remain passive for the early stages of the game. Instead, he plays knight takes d5, and we soon arrive at a line of the Queen's Gambit declined semi-terrish variation. Okay, bishop c4, c takes d4 ed, bishop e7. Now knight f6 is one alternative. Meyer here, no, after White's 10th move, rook e1. Knight f6 is an old alternative. Meyer instead plays the more active bishop f6. And here Kramnik spurns the typical move here, which is knight e4. That is favored by most players in this position, which leads to b6, typically, to develop the bishop on c8. And then White has various choices, a3, knight takes f6 check, and so forth. Basically, it's considered that Black has an active, solid game sufficient to equalize. So instead he plays bishop b3, and here Meyer uncorks a novelty with knight d5 to e7, and attacking the pawn on d4. And here Kramnik, after some deliberation, plays bishop f4. We thought rook e4 was a viable alternative. I'm sure he considered it. One idea behind rook e4 is then if knight d5 for White to continue with d4, d5. If knight f5, d5. And the point being, if e takes d5, knight takes d5, that's unpleasant for Black. And if bishop takes c3, b takes c3, e takes d5, bishop takes d5, well, maybe White can make something of his bishop pair from this position. Black has other alternatives after rook e4, including b6 and so on and so forth. Instead, he played bishop f4, offering up the d4 pawn. And also I should point out, bishop e3 is another perfectly sensible move here, protecting the pawn on d4. But he went with a more ambitious bishop f4, and you don't often see Vladimir Kramnik giving up center pawns for very little compensation. But that may be what we have here, because Meyer he could have played knight takes d4 as well. Then if knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, knight b5, that's about the only justification for the pawn sack. I guess also queen f3 with rook a d1 idea is plausible, but objectively, black must be doing okay uh, with that solid extra center pawn. Really, white has no obvious line of attack here. Also, if knight b5, as I just mentioned, black can play bishop takes b2, queen takes d8, rook takes d8, rook a d1. That appears white's best chance, but seriously, doesn't look too challenging for black. For instance, there black can consider bishop d7, offering the exchange. Then if bishop c7, black simply plays bishop takes b5. And what black has two pawns for the exchange, a solid position, no weaknesses. He can take the rook. Now the knight can go to c6 and can go to f5, where very little for white to show for white as far as any advantage, serious advantage. There are some possibilities after knight takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, knight b5, bishop takes b2, including rook b1, which may be the most reliable answer. Then if bishop f6, white can play for a draw. Queen takes d8, rook takes d8, knight c7, rook b8, and we get a perpetual attack on the rook. That may have been the wisest course for white's point of view. If black had played knight takes d4. Instead, he played bishop takes d4, also quite playable. Knight takes d4, knight takes d4. Now white has the bishop pair, and black's bishop on c8 is locked in for the time being, but still a pawn is a pawn, and black also carries a threat of knight takes b3. So white needs to keep his bishop pair intact to hope for any serious comp. And here Meier continues quite logically with knight ec6, supporting the knight on d4. Kramnik continues his mobilization. Queen f6, perfectly logical move, although queen b6 was another perfectly sensible alternative and also carries a threat of queen takes b2. But logically, it's understandable that he plays queen f6 to keep the queen next to the king. And he attacks the bishop as well, keeps the initiative. And Kramnik resorts to the bizarre bishop invasion, bishop c7, but there's really not much else to recommend there. And now he's inviting black to play queen e7. Now, if queen e7, this fails completely. Knight d5, it looks like it's a possible chance to make a perpetual check. The point is, after queen d7, knight f6 check, gf6, queen g4 check, king h8, queen h4, it looks a little sticky for black. For one thing, if queen e7, bishop d6 is rather disagreeable. I think though, even there, the best white has is a draw by perpetual check. But actually, after queen h4, black can do better, play rook g8, and if queen takes f6 check, play rook g7, and white's struggling piece down with very little to show for it. So after queen e7, really white has nothing better than either bishop f4 or bishop g3, and we could get a repetition of moves. Queen f6, bishop c7, and so forth. But instead, Meier played a major mistake. E5. Now he wants to anchor that knight on d4 and liberate his bishop, but in so doing, he surrenders the d5 square. Now the bishop on c4 comes alive, and in fact, all of white's pieces, every one of them, are energized by this mistake, e5. So now from here to the end, Kramnik never lets up. Perfect attacking play after this serious flub from Meier. Gives away the d5 square. Okay. Now black plays queen g5. He wants to play bishop h3 or bishop g4, but now white just simply undermines the whole scheme with f4. And that opens up the e-file, and diagonals and files are opened up at great cost to black. Queen h4, and now he simply drives that well-placed queen away from the action, and drives it to d8. So here, if queen g5, I think Kramnik had planned to play lift the rook, rookie for threatening rook takes d4. And now if the knight flees to e6, white plays rook g4, and he has a sustained attack. Then if queen h6, he keeps up the pressure with rook h4. And if queen g6, if rook h5, if queen g5, he's got rook h5, stepping up the pressure. After queen g6 here, now he can play queen f3, and black's threatening rook g4 and knight f6 check. Very hard for black to move any of his pieces here without disaster happening. But still, it looks like this was a better alternative, queen g5, to the game continuation, which really loses by force. That was his last hope, bad as it was. Instead, he played queen d8, and now Kramnik has a forced win. Knight c7, attacking the rook. Rook b8, knight b5, attacking the rook. And of course, here, if knight takes knight, white plays queen takes d8, rook takes d8, and then bishop takes b8. And white emerges the solid exchange ahead. Black has a pawn for it, but white's rooks he has open files. He's soon going to trade off rooks and have a technically winning position. So Meier moves the rook, and here comes the bishop now to d6, attacking the rook. Again, if knight takes b5, bishop takes f8, results in a solid exchange advantage for white. Still, that was black's best recourse here, but instead he played rook e8, and that just the attacking floodgates are opened. His guard over f7 is relaxed, and now Kramnik instantly seizes his opportunity. Much better than rook takes e8, queen takes, knight c7, queen e3 check. Black is very much in the game. In fact, he has the advantage. That'd be a mistake. He plays a much more powerful bishop takes f7 check. Always look at violent forcing moves. Draws the king out. So now white plays queen h5 check, g6, queen takes pawn check, king f6. And now knight takes d4. Here's a critical moment. What happens after queen takes d6? Well, then white wins. Rook f1 check, forces bishop f5. Knight takes f5, gf5. Rook takes f5 check. King e6. Queen f7 mate. So knight takes f5 is just completely overwhelming. There's no good queen move. Game is over. And also, if black plays, after knight takes d4, if he plays rook takes e1 check, rook takes e1, queen takes d6, that loses to rook f1 check, king e5 forced, because bishop f5 loses again to knight takes f5. We've seen that before. And if he plays king e5, if he plays king e5 trying to run with the king, then white wins with knight f3 check. King e6 forced, otherwise rook d1 check, knight g5 check, king d5, and white now wins with queen f7 check. Poor king. The king cannot go to c5 because of knight e4 check, and he can't go to d4 either, so he's got to play bishop e6, and then white wins nicely with queen f3 check. The poor king on d5 really feeling it. And now if king c5, we have queen a3 check, knight e4 check, all winning. And if he goes king e5, then we have mate, queen e4 mate. Finally, if he goes king to c4, white wins with queen b3 check, King c5, and now knight takes e6 check wins, many other wins as well. Knight e4 check also, and black can resign. So in this difficult position, he took on d4, and now Kramnik finishes flawlessly. Queen h4 check, and he wanted more than queen takes d4. That's gives white a huge advantage, but he goes for mate. Rook c7 check. And now if queen takes c7, white wins with rook f1 check, followed by taking the queen. That would have been black's quote-unquote best, but he tries bishop d7 to stay in the game. And now Kramnik finishes nicely. Rook at queen h7 check. Forced. Rook f1 check. Now knight f5, rook takes d7 leads to an easy win. So he tries king e6. Queen takes g6 check, and now he walks into it with rook c5 mate. And that is our game of the day from round 9 of the Dortmund chess meeting, won on tiebreak by Fabiano Caruana of Italy, ahead of Sergey Karjakin of Russia. Great tournament, and I'm invite listeners to join us for coverage of the Beal Super Tournament coming up at the end of July, and that promises to be quite an event as well. So this is Larry Christiansen on behalf of all our staff here at ICC. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Hi there, chess fans, with today's new in chess trivia question, where during our Game of the Day coverages, you can win a 1-year subscription to the award-winning Dutch magazine, New in Chess. All you have to do is to listen carefully to today's question and send your answer by email to us at trivia@chessclub.com. Please remember to also include your full name, ICC username,